This is a KGGF News special report. I'm Debra Woodall with a one-on-one newsmaker interview with perhaps the most powerful man in the communications industry, Federal Communication Commission Chairman Ajit Pai. Mr. Pai, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
So, how is it that a young man from Parsons, Kansas becomes a member of the FCC, let alone chairman?
Boy, it's really a humbling honor. I never would have guessed when I was growing up in southeast Kansas that I'd have this opportunity. But I came to Washington in 1998 and held a variety of jobs. And next thing you know, I just looked up and here the President of the United States is tapping me for this important responsibility. So it's just a combination of good luck and hard work and support of family and friends back home, I guess.
So what kind of role do you think that growing up in southeast Kansas played in your success as a hometown guy, so to speak?
Oh, the great question. I think a few different things. First, it gave me an appreciation for the fact that being civil and decent to people is really important, and it helps no matter what field you're in, but especially in politics. I've had the chance to get to know folks from across the political spectrum and with a variety of different views, and just the ability to work well with people is something that I think has helped me out quite a bit. And the second thing is just having an appreciation for the diversity of the country. I think a lot of people, even some of my best friends who are from the coast, look at places like Parsons and Coffeyville as so-called flyover country. But to me, I think it's important to remember that every American deserves an equal opportunity, and that's especially true when it comes to things like Internet access. And so just having that rural Kansas perspective has helped me balance out the views, so to speak, of those who you might not be focused on it.
You know, you kind of just alluded to it, but a lot of discussion lately on net neutrality. And first of all, for our listeners, could you give us a brief explanation of what exactly net neutrality is?
Another good question. So net neutrality involves the basic concept of how the government should regulate the Internet. The concept is that people should be able to access the lawful content of their choice whenever they go online, and you don't want Internet service providers blocking access to websites and things like that. And I think that's something that most people generally believe in. We all have thrived under a free and open Internet, and that's what's allowed companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon to become household names. And the only question is what legal framework we should adopt at the FCC and in Congress to secure that free and open Internet. And that's the basic debate about net neutrality that's happening today here in Washington.
You know, there are those who oppose net neutrality, and their claims are things like it could impede what you're talking about in terms of free and equal access to Internet service, and that it could actually be more difficult for those who are perhaps lower income. Does that argument hold any weight?
I don't think it does for two different reasons. Number one, these rules were imposed just 2 years ago, these net neutrality regulations. Before that, we had 20 years of so-called light touch regulation that started in the Clinton administration. And during those 20 years, we had a very free and open Internet. We didn't see your companies blocking access to websites and the like. Number two, these regulations actually harm rural and especially low-income urban Americans because they impede investment by the companies that are building these networks. And so, for example, we've heard from a number of smaller Internet service providers, some serving places like Parsons and Coffeyville, who said these regulations are so heavy-handed that we can't get financing from banks to build out our networks. We're putting our plans to improve Internet access on hold because there's too much uncertainty. And I think that's the last thing we want to do. We want to promote more deployment in rural areas, and we want more competition. And I'm afraid that these regulations that were adopted 2 years ago, they're taking us in the opposite direction from that.
You know, Stephen Colbert said some things recently that have drawn your attention, especially, it seems, regarding President Trump. And when you became chairman of the FCC, Mr. Pai, did you think that you would spend your time investigating a talk show host's comments?
That's a good question. It wasn't at the front of my radar. I've been focusing on things like rural internet access first and foremost. But this job is all-encompassing. That's one of the things I've learned is that our jurisdiction is pretty broad. And so when we get complaints about things like this or about anything, we're duty-bound under the law to take a look and figure out what the facts are and apply the law fairly. And that's exactly what we're doing. It's part of our standard operating procedure, so to speak.
In an investigation like that, what are the possible outcomes? And realizing it is under investigation, so you can't speak directly to the Cobair incident, but in a similar situation, what could happen?
Yeah, generally speaking, there's a range. We can take no action because we find that the facts don't warrant it, and if we do find that there's a violation, then we have to decide what the appropriate sanction should be. And traditionally, the FCC has imposed things like fines, for instance, on the stations that broadcast something that's in violations of the rules, and so. As I said, we're taking a careful look at the facts, and we're going to faithfully apply the law. And whatever decision we make, it's going to be driven by those two factors. We're not going to take politics or anything else into account as we do it.
Now, taking your Reese's Peanut Butter Cup mug aside, what is the best part of your job?
To me, the best part of the job is being able to get out of Washington and visit some of the people across the country who are affected by our decisions. And I've had the chance to visit with entrepreneurs in Youngstown, Ohio, and parents in inner city Los Angeles, and Alaska Natives above the Arctic Circle. And one of my favorite visits came when I got a chance to visit my hometown high school, Parsons High School, a few years ago. And just to understand from them what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and those are the stories that I get while I'm on the road that really invigorate me when I'm back here in Washington, and it just makes me all the more committed to making sure that every American who wants access to next generation technologies is able to get it. And I feel incredibly privileged, considering everything that the people face in this country, that I've been given this responsibility, and it's just been great so far.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, just that I'm so grateful for the folks in Southeast Kansas for the culture they raised me in and the support they've given me in this position. It really means a lot. And if folks ever want to get in touch, feel free to find me on Twitter @Ajit Pai FCC. It's fantastic to be from Southeast Kansas, and I'm going to keep spreading that message to anyone who's willing to hear here in the Beltway.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, FCC Chairman Ajit Pai.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Debra Woodall, KGGF News. GGF.